وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وهل أتاك حديث موسى إذ رأى نارا فقال لأهلهم كثوا إني آنست نارا لعلي آتيكم منها بقبس أو أجد على النار هدى فلما أتاها نودي يا موسى إني أنا ربك فاخلع نعليك إنك بالوادي المقدس طوى وأنا اخترتك فاستمع لما يوحى إنني أنا الله لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدني وأقم الصلاة لذكري إن الساعة آتية أكاد أخفيها لتجزى كل نفس بما تسعى فلا يصدنك عنها من لا يؤمن بها واتبع هواه فتردى وما تلك بيمينك يا موسى قال هي عصاي أتوكأ عليها وأهش بها على غنمي ولي فيها مآرب أخرى قال ألقها يا موسى فألقاها فإذا هي حية تسعى قال خذها ولا تخف سنعيدها سيرتها الأولى واضمم يدك إلى جناحك تخرج بيضاء من غير سوء آية أخرى لنريك من آياتنا الكبرى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي واجعل لي وزيرا من أهلي هارون أخي اشدد به أزري وأشركه في أمري كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا قال قد أوتيت سؤلك يا موسى ولقد مننا عليك مرة أخرى آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم.
For today's reading, I'm going to be reading Dua Ahad. It is reported from Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam that whoever recites this dua for 40 days after morning prayers will be amongst the helper of the 12th Imam alayhi salam. Should he or she die before the reappearance of the Imam, Allah will raise him or her from the grave in order for the reciter of this dua to present himself in front of the Imam alayhi salam. Salawat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. O Allah, Lord of the great light, Lord of the elevated throne, Lord of the temptations seas and the revealer of the Tawah, Injil and Zabur, Lord of the shadows and the warmth and the revealer of the great Quran, Lord of the proximate angels and the prophets of the messenger. O Allah, I beseech thee for the sake of your noble visage, and for the sake of your enlightening visage and your ever-existing kingdom, O ever-living, O controller, I beseech thee in your name, which lit the heavens and the earth, and in your name by which ancient and the latter ones become upright, O ever-living, who has before every living being, O ever-living, who shall exist after every living being, O ever-living, who existed when there was no life, O giver of the life to the dead, O one who causes death to the living ones, O ever-living, there is no God except thou. O Allah, send our master, the leader, the guide, and the guided, the upriser with your command. Blessings of Allah be on him and his pure forefathers, from all the believing men and the believing women in the easts of the earth, and its wests, and in its plains, and in its mountains, and its lands, and in its seas, from me and from my parents, blessings which are the weight of Allah's throne and ink of his words, and whatever his knowledge enumerates and his book encompasses. O Allah, renew for him my covenant, pledge my allegiance on the back in the morning of this day of mine, and whatever days of my life that I live. I shall never turn away from it, nor let it vanish. O Allah, appoint me among his helpers, aides, and his protectors, those who hasten to fulfill his commands and obey his orders, those who are his supporters and complete with each other to fulfill his intention and seek martyrdom in his presence. O Allah, if death occurs between me and him before the reappearance, death which you have made obligatory and decreed for your servants, then raise me from my grave, wrapped in my shroud and my sword unsheathed, my spear bared, answer the call in the cities as well as the deserts. O Allah, show me the rightly guided face of the Imam alayhi salam, the praiseworthy moon referring to the face of Imam alayhi salam, and enlighten my vision by looking at him, and hasten his reappearance, make his arrival smooth, vasten his path, make me tread on his way, and implement his authority and strengthen his back. O Allah, inhabit your cities through him, and give life to your servants due to him, for surely you have said your word is the truth. Corruption will become rampant in the land and on the seas of the evil which men's hands have earned. Then, O Allah, manifest for us your slaves and the son of your prophet's daughter, for whose name is the same as of your messenger, so that nothing from falsehood is victorious except that he tears them falsehoods to pieces and establishes the truth, and the truth confirms him. And O Allah, appoint him as the refuge for your oppressed servants and a helper for the ones who do not find any helpers for himself except you, and the renewer of all the laws, and the book which you have been tampered with, and the rebuilder of science of your religion, and the traditions of your prophet, peace be upon him and his progeny. And O Allah, make him among those whom you have protected from the evils of the adversaries. O Allah, and provide joy to your prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his progeny, by his vision and the vision of the one who follows him on his call, and have mercy on our poverty after his arrival. O Allah, remove his sorrows of occultation from this nation with his presence, and hasten for us his reappearance. They, the disbelievers, consider it to be distant, while we consider it to be near. For the sake of your mercy, O the most merciful of all mercifuls in this dunya, then one shall gently strike his right thigh with his palm and say, Hasten, hasten, O my master, O the master of this era and of this dunya. Salawat.
Surah Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. You are the best amongst nations, and the sign for you to be best is that you do Amar bil Maruf and Nahi Anil Munkar. Chapter 3, 110 ayat. We have been discussing this topic consistently, that we have been chosen by Allah to be the best nation, not because of our ethnicity, not because of our heritage in terms of our heritage in terms of our blood or race, but because only because we do Amar bil Maruf and Nahi Anil Munkar. We promote good and we forbid evil. That's the criteria that Allah has chosen for us to be best, and that is what we must pursue for our own nafs, for our own selves, also for our communities, our community, the broader Muslim Ummah, as well as for the world and the societies in which we live. Our topic yesterday was focused on the society in which we live. Now, the next question becomes, at a global level, we are confronted with many things. For example, hijab protests very recently that happened. Then we are confronted with diversity movement that's taking place, and these human rights movements that are raising their head all over the world. And what we need to do is to understand our role from the perspective of Amar bil Maruf and Nahi Anil Munkar. Because these movements are trying to define values for us. In certain cases, we're being made feel guilty that our values may not be consistent with certain developments that are happening. We're being asked in certain cases to alter, to change our values. So that's a very important topic, because now we're talking about at a global level. So not just our own society here, but at a global level, we have to come up with a solution for this, or at least understand, because we are, based on our values, even though Allah is saying you're the best nation, but others are saying you may be oppressor, you may sound like an oppressor, you may look like an oppressor. And that's what our topic is today. Salawat, please. I will start by simple concept of Tawheed. That's a very important concept for us as we discuss this. Tawheed, as we understand, the opposite of shirk, which is shirk, the word essentially, if you can think of sharik or partner or someone who contributes or is Allah as not being the only one, but someone else who is also with him, that's shirk. And when you say La ilaha illallah, essentially you're denying that there is any other power, any other ruler besides Allah. Now, it's important to understand that the concept of Rububiyat is different than Uluhiyat, which is Uluhiyat meaning that when you say Ilah, that is a very different concept than saying Allah is Rabbul Alameen or Rabbul Alameen, which is what you say when in implying that Allah is the sustainer of the universe. La ilah concept is of ruler. Often it's confused with mabud. Mabud means someone who's worthy of worship and who should be worshipped. So we confuse that with ilah concept, often implying that someone who's worthy of worship, and then abdiyat, being an abd, implies worshiping. That's not what ilah is. Ilah is ruler. Allah is the only ruler over us. He's the one who rules. And that is the testimony that we are providing every day in our prayers also. So it's important to keep that in mind as I will explain the events, some events also to give you a good perspective of that. And these are actually some very powerful events, and that make at least followers of Imam Ali very, very happy when we think about those events. The most prominent event, which is related to Tawheed, although Prophets and Imam Ali's entire life, every moment of their lives is spent in defending Tawheed. And but this moment is at the conquest of Mecca. That's when Muslim forces, pretty much bloodless type of invasion, they came in, and Mecca surrendered. They come in. Prophet provides amnesty to everyone. Prophet says trees should be saved, animals should not be killed, families should be protected. It doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or not Muslim, whether you have converted or not converted. But the thing is that life should be spared, life should be saved, and that is his way. But there is one thing that happens which is very important to understand, which is when Prophet goes in Kaaba and he goes in there, 360 idols that are placed over there in Kaaba. Now Prophet starts destroying those idols. That is where we are trying to, it's being told to us conceptually from that now you have understood that Allah is your ruler. And when Allah rules, then these idols should not exist, especially in Kaaba. Kaaba represents Allah. Kaaba is, as you say, Allah's house. It represents that. So Prophet starts breaking these idols. Now pay attention to this, what I am about to say, and I know it will bring smiles on your faces. And then Prophet starts breaking, and then he turns back, and he sees that there are some very big idols there. So smaller ones right there that he can break, but they are big idols. And then he turns back, and Imam Ali is there, and he calls Imam Ali. He said, "Come here, Ali." Imam Ali goes to Prophet and Prophet says, "Now climb on my shoulders." Imam Ali feels a little hesitant. The Prophet is asking him to climb on his shoulders. "Ali, climb on my shoulders." Imam Ali climbs on his shoulders, and Prophet says that, "Okay, start breaking those big idols that are over there." Imam Ali starts doing that as if a collaboration of work is going on between Prophet and Imam Ali to destroy those idols. In a way, Prophet is saying to Imam Ali that, look, my ummah will destroy smaller idols, but Ali, those who say Ali, Ali, will destroy larger, bigger idols. Right? That's if you think about the message that's coming out of there, that is, we are tasked with destroying bigger idols. Now, in our generation, in today's generation, we have taken out physical idols and we have replaced them with cognitive idols. What are cognitive idols? Well, these social media influencers. When someone is telling us to do something which goes against what Allah is saying to us, and we accept that not only at individual level, but we start accepting things at a social level, that is shirk. Because now, in a way, we have said that some other power exists over us, some other ruler exists over us, whether it's social media influencer, whether it's celebrity worshiping, whether it's something else, whether these frames that have been cast for us, these constructs of ideas that have been given to us, that are being fed to us at this point, that this is what you ought to be, these are idols. treat them as idols. Think of them as idols. Think of them that you are followers of Imam Ali, the one who, who Prophet chose to destroy those idols, the big ones. Not just chose him, he asked him to stand on his shoulders to go and break those idols. So collectively, what we were told from that incident, from that event, is that followers of Ali, whenever you see idols, small or big, you are the one who needs to destroy those idols. If Ali's followers become idol worshippers, whether of physical idols or of cognitive idols, then there's a problem. You agree? There's a problem, right? So we need to develop that thinking that if a certain cognitive frame, a conceptual construct, is it's guiding us away from Allah's message and it's changing the values that have been given to us by Allah, then in a way that's an idol. That's just like it's not a physical idol, but it is an idol even though it's not physical. Salawat. So, how do these cognitive idols take shape? How do these constructs are formed? There is a three-step process for this. Step number one is someone, usually people with power, people who have power and resources. They say whether they have tested their values or not, whether they have seen whether their values work or not, but they just say, okay, my values are true. That's step number one. Then they somehow formalize those values and create some kind of standards against those values. They say these values are now standards. That's step number two. Step number three, they go in and they start imposing that standard on everyone else. That's step number three. Number one, take your own values without testing them whether they work or not. They may be destroying your own society, but somehow you would turn them into a standard. Then apply that standard going out on every other society. That's how these frames are formed. In step one, in step two, you have so many think tanks who issue these reports based on self-created standards, saying that this is the truth because we say this is the truth. And then when you start imposing those values on other societies, especially when you're doing it in the name of democracy, that's exactly anti-democracy. Because what you're doing is you're essentially becoming authoritarian. You're saying my values should be imposed on every other society. Do they get a say in this, that these are not our values? That's how these frames are formed. That's how these idols are created, for which you have been tasked to identify and fail those and destroy those idols, these cognitive frames that are being formed to affect you and your performance. And we see that happening day in, day out. So these reports come out that say, well, this is a global standard because we say so. These are human rights because we define these as human rights. Well, perhaps we should say that we will define human rights based on Islam. We will issue our own report based on Islam, define our standards. Maybe these are the 20 things that we will judge societies and countries based upon. Islamic values. And then issue a report every year. This is how everyone stands on this. Number one, number two, number three, who's the best country in following Islamic standards, who's the second country, which is the third country, all the way to 150. That's our standard. Why can't we do that? We have very smart people all over the world. We should think about creating think tanks that do these kind of reports, start issuing these reports, so that we are not always in this defensive mode of someone else imposes their standards on us, and then we say, oh, no, we are actually this, this is how we are. That's always behind the curve. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we change the game. The game changing is that we say these are Islamic standards, And we have think tanks that actually issue reports on those standards. And then, whoever is ranked that, on that report in whatever way we calculate, that becomes a report which is counter to whoever is defining standards for us. Salawat. So the example is for the problem with these standards is that, for example, if you go on an island and this island has never seen anything but oranges, and they think oranges are fruits. Now you come in and you try to show them that, look, these apples are also fruits. They would say no. Oranges, that's the only thing. What about peaches? No. Mangoes? No. Oranges, that's the only fruit. That's the problem we are running into. And frankly, it would have been a different issue if for one reason or another, those values were actually good values or that were working for us. But if you think about, for the world, if you think about the worst possible ideologies that have gone up in last, 100 years, what is it? Let's say Nazism, right? Bad ideology, killed millions of people, innocent people. Fascism, right? Bad ideology, killed millions of people. What else? Now this progressive liberalism that we are worried about, which is destroying human values in many, many cases, and for those people who don't believe in those values, and then which are being imposed on them. Also racism. We saw racism just a few years back coming out from several global governments, which were based on, they were openly promoting racism. So we know all that. Now, a simple question I'm going to ask you, all of you young people here, which one of these four, Nazism, fascism, racism, anything, came out of Karbala? Which one of them came out of Najaf? Which one of them came out of Qum? Which one of them came out of Mashhad? None of them. Where do they come out from? So all of these bad things are coming out from different countries, and we are supposed to feel guilty about our values? How's that possible? None of these values came out. None of these movements came out of the knowledge centers of Ahlul Bayt. None of these values. So why should we feel guilty about our own values? Why should we feel bad about our own values? No, what you have to do is to make sure that develop that confidence that your values are correct. You should stand for your values. That's what the key message of Ahlul Bayt is. That's the key message of Allah is for you to believe on your values and to stay consistent. Now, we can look at these countries and we can say, okay, maybe these bad things came out of you and we can help you. Because again, as I said yesterday, that prophets, all this ideology of prophets is what we possess. So we can always go and help people develop better values. That's what our role is. That's what Amr bin Maruf, Nahi Anil Munkar is. Salawat. And if people want to see examples of good values, come to our mosques. See the diversity that we have here. Do we judge white people over black people or brown people? No. When people come in this mosque, everyone is same. When people even outside of your communities, we're not even designed to think that way. The first row of prayers, when it happens, do we think that who should be in the first row, who should be in the second row? No. We have built-in mechanisms to fight these kind of problems that we see in various societies. What about diversity of women? Well, come to this center, or any Shia center that exists. Women organize azadari independently. They organize, they administer, they manage, they have naha khans, they have speakers, they have marsiya khans, everyone. The entire azadari in there, it's managed, separately by women. That's empowerment. That's empowerment. Today, there are communities that are struggling to fight over whether, a woman can do a lecture or not. Advanced, and they call themselves advanced. See, that's the thing, that we don't pay attention about all the great things that we have. And that is, again, I want to build that confidence in you to start seeing yourself as not needing anyone's values, in fact, being able to help others develop better values. Salawat. And I was thinking about that Prophet himself, when he declared 1400 years ago, know that a white person is not superior to a black person or a white person. Prophet is declaring this 1400 years ago. An Arab over a non-Arab, or an Ajam over Arab, no one has priority. Prophet saying, Bilal, go do this azan, climb over Kaaba and do this azan. If you think about that society, those values, they're built in our Islam. We have never had racism, or we never had these kind of problems, because what was the measure for us? Taqwa. Even today, what's the measure? Taqwa. It doesn't matter if the Imam comes in, these are like Sheikh Zakzaki, for example, from Nigeria. What a great alim. And his perseverance, more than 1 million people converted to Shiaism. And not just that, six of his sons were killed. Look at his sabr. 6 of his sons were martyred by these forces, but he still does his work. He was denied health care when he got sick. All those things were happening to him, but his values stayed consistent. And that's the beauty of it. So much so, if you go to our houses and, different places, see all the diversity, different type of students that get there. No one is divided into that I'm this group, I'm that group, I'm white, I'm black, I'm this. No, none of that. That's the beauty. That's the power of Islam. There's the power of this community, I think, which is very important. And even at Hajj, think about Hajj. Not only people are coming together, and some of the brothers, some brothers and sisters who went for Hajj, may Allah qabul their Hajj, they're from this community. And they saw this firsthand. Everyone is there together. There is no discrimination, nothing. Everyone is doing their Hajj. And so much so that you can't even see your own self in a mirror. Can you believe that? That you cannot even see your own reflection during the time of that Hajj because you're wearing ihram. Even you're denying your own self and saying there's only Allah. Such is the beauty of your values. So feel good about that. Feel thankful to Allah that you were trained in these values, you were raised in these values. Salawat. So, one of the things that is argued is that, look, values are universal, and you talk to people and they say they refer you to United Nations Charter, which is on universal values, a good charter. I think it's important. But there is certain things that we need to recognize about that charter also. So this was agreed upon in 1948, United Nations Charter for Human Rights in 1948. So there was a committee formed, and this committee was headed by Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady, Mrs. Roosevelt. She was the one who led this committee that formed these rules that eventually are known as Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it talks about equality and inherent rights of humans, and about everyone being members of human family. That's good values. That's good values. But if you think about the reality of, and people, that those people who are African Americans who are part of this community who are here would have had grandfathers who probably are still alive in America in 1948. So we were agreeing to all these things, and we were promoting these things, these values in the United Nations. But at the same time, what was our own position here? Would those African Americans, their grandfathers, would have been able to go to the same bathroom in 1948? No. Would they have been able to sit on a seat in a bus next to another person, a white person? No. Were we able to do that in 1949, 1950, 1951, 52, 53? No. So we were promoting those values for the rest of the world when our own situation was very, very different. How long? It took 20 more years to get to a civil rights bill after that. And then, since then, we have had this systemic discrimination that everyone talks about. So think about this, that don't allow any kind of arguments to be used against you from these kind of things. Stand for your own values. Just say that, you signed this in 1948. My prophet announced this 1400 years ago. As simple as that. You signed this in 1948 when you were yourself, many countries were not doing it, but our prophet did that in 1948. And I think that's the power of, again, why this happens, why our values, our approach is different, because societies are based on three things: sociology or social force, political force, and economic force. These are three forces. And every model in the world that exists today, except the model that you have, is very much focused on political and economic forces. Not so much on social side. When they use the word social or for socialism, it typically implies economic ideology. So that distribution of wealth in society, not so much as social values. But if you take sociology as a subject, it's a very different subject, which is focused on values and culture and all those things. So whether you look at progressive democracy capitalism model, which is focused on two things, our politics will be based on democracy and our economics based on capitalism. Or you look at communist model, our politics will be based on authoritarianism, and our economic model will be based on communism. Those two things. But when it comes to social values, we're open-ended. Doesn't matter. Whatever values take us, if they take us towards worse values, that's fine. So we keep two things intact. Political, we don't change. Economic, we don't change the model. We don't change capitalism. We don't change democracy. But we're okay with if values get changed in society. Well, that's something you can't do. From your perspective, your values are just as consistent as any kind of political model, and in fact, that's more important. So, yes, democracy is good, yes, capitalism is good, but if values are going down, are being degraded, that's a problem. And we know, as I mentioned yesterday, that suffering increases, human suffering increases. So we have to be responsible for making sure that we stand for the right values. Salawat. So there's a concept that I want to share with you, which is very important to understand. Think of it as values hacking. That's what happens with communities when others come in and they hack your values. And Allah has provided a defense for you in terms of two words. It's very important to understand. Remember, most of you would have heard these words, and I'm sure that you would understand, many of you would understand these words of Fasek and Fajr, right? Fasek and Fajr. In Quran, I will just provide reference so you can check it on your own. From Fajr, which is the Fajr word, when it happens, it's on 80, chapter 80, and ayat number 42, in which Fajra is the word used. And then for Fasek, it's in chapter 3, ayat number 82. Fasikun is the word that's used. So where do these words come from? These words, Fasik and Fajr, if you go back to the old Arabic traditions, in which, if you look at date has a little film over it. Date, the fruit date that you eat, dates. It has a little film over it. When that film gets breached a little bit, that's where the word Fajr comes from, or Fajr. That's why you call the Fajr, the morning prayer name is Fajr, because darkness is breached by light. As light rises, darkness is breached. That's where the word Fajr comes from. And the same Fajur, same exact word. When the fruit itself sometimes comes out of the date, when it's breached, the inside, the one that you eat, that part comes out. That's where you're looking at Fasek, or coming out. That act of something coming out of its boundary. That's where the origin of Fasek is. So Allah has established this boundary. As you understand that now analogy, you will remember this, forever. That Fajr is one who breaches the boundary that Allah has established. So when that boundary is breached, when you say that it's okay to sin, it's okay to break your values, that's Fajr. When you come out of the boundary of religion, start operating outside of it, and even claiming that this boundary of this religion should be expanded to include what I am saying, not what Allah is saying, that's Fasek. Imam Hussein actually used that word in his first khutbah for when he was leaving Medina for Yazid, that he is Fasek. That's the word that was used. So it's important to understand the responsibility that's placed on us. One type of sin happens, which is counter to Iman. Iman goes away. When we say that Iman, when the moment we become Fasek or Fajr, Iman goes away. So our belief system goes up. So we have to make sure that we are conscious of that. When the breach happens, when we're sinning, when that is first Fajr. That's what makes us Fajr. When we come out of the boundary and we say establish remapping what the boundary should be, that's Fasek. And so you have to remember that, and that's why defending these values, remembering that we don't have this authority to go and say, well, Allah is merciful, so we will change our values. Allah is merciful, and He says that, everything is okay, this is fine, this is fine. Well, Allah is merciful, but that's not how mercy is defined. You cannot just go and change things on your own. Thank you, but no thank you. Allah is merciful. He's merciful because He has asked us to protect these values. And for us, for our own benefit, because Allah knows that the most optimized community, the most optimized solution for this world is if people start believing in those kind of values and start acting in that way. And we're not the only one. The same thing exists in all faith-based religions. Other people who are, who come from especially Abrahamic religions, similar values. So what these values should be part of our decision making on a daily basis. We are not becoming Fasek, we are not becoming Fajr, we are becoming Muslim. That's it. And that's when we are Muslim. And that's what we need to keep in mind and pursue and make sure that we can tell others with confidence that no, we will not change these values. This is because Allah has ordained that among us. Allah has given us. And that's why this whole discussion started with Tawheed, that La ilaha illallah. Every time you read La ilaha illallah, remind yourself who's the ruler, and remind yourself that these values are not open to debate. They are not open to change. And Allah has given us in Quran, in which it's the manual, the perfect manual for operating a human life. Salawat. So if hijab was good then it's good now. Why? Because this is our value. People don't have to agree with that, but societies should have the right to make their own values and live their lives in accordance with that. So hijab was good then, it's good now. Whatever Allah has told, it's good. It's as simple as that. And I think we should be comfortable, again, with that. Do you all agree? Do you feel that way today? That our values are under attack and we need to protect them, and we go back to the basics. You agree? Okay. So as I mentioned, that Imam Hussein used the word Fasek for Yazid. Our Imams made a stand at all times to protect these values. And they understood that Islam sometimes requires that level of intellectual depth where life and death become one and the same, whatever is needed. And that's why one famous sentence that comes out of that's attributed to Hazrat Qasim is when Imam Hussein asked him that, Qasim, how do you find death? How do you find death? And Hazrat Qasim says that if death means dying for you, then it is sweeter than honey. That's a great statement. Just think about that how in 13-year-old boy, but he knows his values. He says death is sweeter than honey if that's what it means if I am dying for you. Now, Imam Hassan himself, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, people still remembered they had animosity against them. So in Karbala, they remembered Imam Hassan. And Hazrat Qasim would have been about 2 or 3 years old when he became an orphan. And Imam Hassan passed away. And I am sure that probably 2 or 3-year-old boy does not remember that much, but he would have heard from Imam Hussein, from others, that how Imam Hassan's funeral was attacked. He would have remembered all that. And he would have grown up with that. Farwa. She, before Imam Hassan died, gave her a letter. And he said, keep it for Qasim. When the time comes, give him this letter. So certain traditions say that it was tied to the arm of Hazrat Qasim, or it was a letter that was kept somewhere. She decided to go Farwa and take Hazrat Qasim also with Imam Hussein. So they accompanied them. Now, as you know, the details that we have been talking about, Karbala, the day before, the night before Ashura, this is where these conversations are taking place, in which mothers are preparing their children for next day. And they're telling them that don't hesitate. And this is now Hazrat Qasim who goes to his uncle, Imam Hussein. Hazrat Qasim says, Uncle, is my name on the list of Shohada? Is my name on the list of Shohada? Imam Hussein looks at him and he says, Qasim, why are you asking this? That's where that conversation took place, that death is sweeter than honey. Hazrat Qasim says that because I want to be a martyr. Imam Hussein says, Qasim, when I look at you, I remember my brother Hassan. Qasim, and Hazrat Qasim says, but uncle, tell me if my name is on the list of Shohada. Imam Hussein says, Qasim, not just your name, even Ali Asghar's name is on that list. Next day arrives. Hazrat Qasim now goes again, uncle, give me permission to go. Imam Hussein says, no, Qasim, I see my brother every time I see you. Now imagine the responsibility of an uncle for an orphaned nephew. Imam Hussein is now looking at Hazrat Qasim looking at Imam Hussein. Hazrat Qasim returns back and he goes in a tent and he starts crying now. He has his head on his knees and he's crying. He's crying, and his mother listens to crying of Hazrat Qasim, as mothers usually respond to. She goes inside the tent and she says, Qasim, why are you crying? Qasim, what happened? And Hazrat Qasim says that Imam Hussein is not letting him go for this fight. He wants to go. He wants to achieve martyrdom. And then his mother says, Qasim, open that letter that your father gave you. Open that letter. Hazrat Qasim opens that letter and it says, Dear Qasim, my love my love Qasim, my son Qasim, there will come a time when my Hussein will be helpless. My Hussein will be ghareeb. My Hussein will be Mazloom. My brother Hussein will be Mazloom. My Hussein will be helpless at that time, and my Hussein will be thirsty at that time. Do not hesitate to sacrifice your life for Hussein. Hazrat Qasim now looks at that letter and he says, now I have this, I can go. He runs to Imam Hussein. He says, uncle, look at this letter. This is from my father. Imam Hussein takes the letter and he kisses it. It's letter from my brother. He opens it. He reads it. Tears come through from his eyes. And he looks toward Medina and he said, brother Hassan, thank you. Thank you for thinking about me even in this moment. And he mounts Hazrat Qasim on a horse. Hazrat Qasim, before mounting, Imam Hussein says, bring armor. Bring armor. First armor comes, too big. Another armor was brought, too big. Another armor was brought, again, did not fit. 13-year-old boy. Just imagine, you have seen 13-year-old boys. You know, they are they're so small. This armor would not fit him. Armor is not designed for 13-year-olds. When the armor didn't fit, Hazrat Qasim says, uncle, it's okay. I will go without this armor. Hazrat Qasim says, uncle, I'll go without armor. Imam Hussein mounts him on the horse. It goes. The horse starts going, and Hazrat Qasim takes out his sword. Now, Hazrat Qasim does a battle that people were surprised. He killed one of the fiercest warrior of that time. Not only him, but first he sent his sons. Hazrat Qasim killed those sons. Then he goes himself. That warrior who was known in the Arab world, and he goes, and Hazrat Qasim kills him also. At that time, Ibn Sa'd says, everyone goes attack this boy. Now, whoever had a sword, he was slashing Qasim with that sword. Whoever had a dagger was stabbing Qasim with that. Whoever had a club was hitting Qasim with that. And dozens of these people, Hazrat Qasim falls down. Hazrat Qasim falls down, says, uncle. Imam Hussein sees. Imam Hussein now gets on his horse and starts riding toward Hazrat Qasim. Now there is chaos as Hazrat Qasim's body had fallen, and these horses, it's hard to even say that. His horses are all over his body. These horses are crushing his body, one going in one direction, one going in another direction, and some of them would have been intentional. Some of them would have been intentional, some of them unintentional. But this body of this 13-year-old getting crushed with these horses, by these horses. Now Imam Hussein gets there. And sees Hazrat Qasim. It's not a body, it's parts of body. Imam Hussein lays a cloth over there, and he starts a piece of cloth and starts accumulating those parts. And then he takes that back. He's taking that back, and obviously women in the tents, they knew that Qasim will not come back alive. Farwa knew that Qasim will not come back alive. Farwa knew that he will not come back with water. But at least they expected that his body will come back whole. They expected that Qasim's body will be brought back whole. No, these Zalimeen, Allah's lanat on these Zalimeen. They kill Qasim. They kill Qasim. Matam Hussein.
اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، حالت سجدہ میں ہے بے کس مجبور بھی ہے، اور کہیں روز کا پیاسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان بولی زینب ظلم شبیر پہ ڈھانے والوں، پتھروں کے تلے میت کو چھپانے والوں، ہائے کاندھے پہ اٹھاتے تھے جن خط میں رسول، میرے اس بھائی کا لاشا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، جس کا غازی نہ رہا اور علی اکبر نہ بچا، بھائی کی لاش پہ کھل کے جس سے رونے نہ دیا، آج ماتم سارے بازار جو غم کرتے ہیں، اس زینب کا دلاسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، میں ہوں زینب مجھے حیدر کو سمجھتا کیوں ہے، سن کے خطبہ میرا ملعون بگڑتا کیوں ہے، بولی زینب کہ یہ خطبہ ہی نہیں سن اے یزید، پاک قرآن کا خلاصہ ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ، اے مسلمان کاش سوچا ہوتا کہ محمد کا نواسا ہے یہ،
السلام علیکم ابا عبداللہ، السلام علیکم ابن رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم ابن امیر المومنین، ابن سید الوسیین، السلام علیکم ابن فاطمۃ الزہراء سید نساء العالمین، السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، السلام علیکم یا غریب الغربا، السلام علیکم معین الضعفاء الفقراء، السلام علیکم شمس الشموس انیس النفوس ایھا المدفون بالزیتوس، السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، السلام علیکم صاحب العصر الزمان خلیفۃ الرحمن مظہر الایمان شریک القرآن عجل اللہ تعالیٰ فرجک و سہل اللہ تعالیٰ مخرجک ظہورک رحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، السلام علیکم ابو الفضل العباس ابن امیر المومنین قاسم بن حسن حانی ابن روا حبیب ابن مظاہر والحر الشہید ریاحی، السلام علیکم یا سادات اولیاء جمیع رحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد۔
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان اللعین الرجیم، بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم، اللہ اکبر اللہ